Welcome to Merge Week 5. I can't tell you guys, how excited I am to be here. My name is Kurt Sherrod. I, along with Concepcion and Mike Harris and my lovely wife JC, have been involved in the financial peace ministry at Central for a couple of years now. My wife JC and I have two wonderful little monsters at home. Jabri, who is 8, and Donovan, who is 5. They know a lot about money. They know a lot about how to, take money out of your wallet. So hopefully by giving you some of these financial basics, we can, set you guys up for success in marriage. So I need to start week 5 with a little bit of a caveat here. So, I am not a financial advisor. I am not a financial expert. I am, in all candor, a bonehead who made a whole bunch of mistakes. And so what I hope to do here is share a little bit of JC and I's story with you, kind of talk you through some of the concepts that we probably didn't learn early enough in our marriage, and hoping that maybe you learn something through some of the mistakes that we made along the way so that you don't make some of the same mistakes that we did. So I really like how Merge has laid this out. We've got 8 financial basics that we want to kind of walk you through, and it's all about growing your marriage. So I think as we go through this, one of the things that you'll realize is that a lot of this is common sense, and in reality, a lot of it isn't really so much about financial elements and things like how you manage debt, how do you invest in retirement, some of that kind of stuff, as much as it is about doing the basic common sense things like having a plan, communicating, talking to each other, being open and transparent. All of the other things that you guys are learning throughout this process apply to finances the same way that they do all of the other things that you guys are learning about. So the fact of the matter is, though, is that the topic of finance isn't sexy. I mean, it's not. But the reality of it is that it is one of the biggest issues and stumbling blocks for people when you get into marriage. Each partner comes into it with a different situation. So when you become one flesh, those two combinations kind of get commingled together, and it can get very complicated. You also come into it with different perspectives about money. You grew up in different households, different cultures. Money was managed different ways. And so as part of that coming together to be one flesh in marriage, there is some acclimatizing that has to happen in order for that to happen. And the way that happens is through having those open and transparent conversations that we talked about a second ago. Let's first start with this. Whenever people in church start talking about money, the conversation invariably goes to, well, God's trying to get at my money, right? No, that's not it. The reality is that God owns it all. So you have to start there. God owns it all no matter how you look at it. He doesn't need our money. He doesn't need your car. He doesn't need your house. It's this conversation is a conversation about stewarding resources. Psalm 50:12 says, if I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine in all its fullness. And he's basically saying, I can feed myself. I don't need you. But he wants us. He wants us to steward the resources for him. He wants to bless us as a result of managing our finances his way. So the other thing to think about is that you can measure the importance of a particular topic by how often people talk about it. So how much does the topic of money matter to God? Well, in fact, you don't have to look any further than the Bible, because the Bible talks about finances just about more than it does any other topic. There are 2,350 verses in the Bible devoted to the topic of money. And in fact, it says twice as much about money as it does faith and prayer combined. Jesus spoke more about money than he did even heaven and hell. Matthew 6:19 through 21, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:24, you can't serve both God and money. The list goes on, right? There is an intimate correlation between a man and a woman's character, especially in the context of marriage, and how they handle money. Think about stories in the New Testament about Zacchaeus, him giving all of his money back to those who deserved it after he had taken more than he should have. The early church releasing funds in Acts to the betterment of all involved. Matthew 19:20 through 22, the rich young ruler and his unwillingness to give back some of what he owned. He couldn't part with his money. If we ever forget that God wants something for us and that God is for us, then everything I'll mention here sounds like discipline, dead religion, and like God is a killjoy. And I read that verbatim because that statement is so powerful. God wants the best for us. He wants to enjoy the thing that we have, the things that he has blessed us with. So God, you have to view the topic of money as God wants you to succeed. He wants you to have good things. God's heart is so much deeper than spend less and give more. And as our hearts change, we begin to gravitate towards the mantra of spending less on ourselves and giving more away. And we'll talk a little bit more about giving as we go through this. So basic number one, always communicate. Okay, I mean this is just kind of basic, right? You have to talk about money in order to be able to manage it successfully. But I've got a couple of practical things here that I want to talk about. Money is an emotional topic, no matter how you manage it. So when you communicate, you have to create, especially about money, you have to create that safe space where you can have non-emotional, fact-based, data-driven conversations about the topic of money. It's almost impossible to be one if this subject matter is not discussed in a meaningful way, in a non-emotional way, on a recurring, regular basis. In fact, one of the best practices that my wife and I have found is we've kind of worked through our marriage and managed multiple financial challenges is that we have weekly budget meetings. It starts off as a little bit of a fist fight. She comes out of her corner, I come out of mine. You come together in the middle, and invariably I leave with a bloody nose and a black eye. Having said that, those conversations, they don't always happen that way. Some will be more difficult than others, but getting into that practice and exercising those muscles over time will make things so much easier as you learn to manage your finances together. When you start having those conversations, practical number 2, talk about the past and the present. When my wife and I got married, you could not have had people who grew up in 2 more different situations with regard to managing money. Her family was all about transparency. The family that I grew up in, my mom and dad had separate checking accounts. So when you come together in marriage, if you're not talking about those expectations and talking about those kinds of detailed things, it's very different to have misaligned expectations with regard to things as simple as, are you going to have joint checking accounts? Are you going to do joint credit card management and things like that? Be very intentional about having those detailed conversations. And then you have to be very honest about your present. What's your current situation? What's your student loan debt? How much credit card debt do you have? Do you have a house payment? Do you have a car payment? What is your credit like? Having those open and transparent conversations will save you so much pain later on in your marriage. Do yourself a favor. Have those conversations right now. And listen, okay, full disclosure, be prepared. It's going to get awkward. There is no 2 ways about that. Guys, you will have a conversation with your wife about the $80 haircut at some point. Okay, I got it. Guys, you will have the conversation with your wife about the new $200 drill that you want to go buy, or the $500 miter saw that you want to go buy, or the round of golf that you want to go play. Yeah, I mean, listen, been there, done that, right? Fishing, cars, whatever it is. You come into those discussions with what you want, and you have to talk about it, and you have to come together and agree on what gets spent. And in general, especially when we talk about the planning discussion, which we'll get to a little bit later, it's okay to be in different places. Generally, as our experience has gone, you generally have one spender and you generally have one saver. You have one who wants to blow through the money, who wants to go out to eat every weekend, who wants to go on vacations, and the other person is more interested in making sure that there's a little bit of money left at the end of the month to put into the kids' college funds, the 529 funds, have a little bit more to put into a 401k or a Roth IRA. It's okay to come at that from two different perspectives, but you've got to have the conversation and you've got to be willing to have compromise. Marriage is not a dictatorship. You both have to be engaged to have a good idea of where things stand from a financial perspective. So let's go to basic number 2. Surround yourself with trusted advisors. Proverbs 15:22 says, "Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed." Again in Proverbs, this time in chapter 12, verse 15. "The way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice." So the natural propensity, especially when you get into conversations, is to say, back off. This is a personal issue. Okay, I got it. But you need wise counsel. Isolation is like living in darkness. The longer you stay in the dark, the harsher the light is when it shines on whatever it is you're trying to hide. When you're married and pursuing oneness, it's easy to get into groupthink. Okay, what do I mean by groupthink? The two of you, as you talk about it and as you work on your finances, begin to coalesce. And you start to think more like one individual, you think like one flesh, and you start to act like one flesh. But invariably, you will end up in a situation that neither of you has ever dealt with before. You have to find those trusted advisors, those people who can talk you through things like buying your first house. How do you go buy a car? When's the right time to buy a car? When's the right time to buy the house? When's the right time to start investing? How do you get prepared to have children? That doesn't mean that you call on those people for every decision, but for the big decisions that you make in your life, having somebody that you can reach out to is very, very important. Now, the other thing that I need to kind of give you guys here as you think about finding the trusted advisors is make sure that you find somebody who is a neutral third party in all of this. Going to your in-laws or her in-laws to be the trusted advisor can create the opportunity for bias. There can be side taking there. If you can find somebody that you both trust external to that, who you can have those fact-based, non-emotional conversations with, who is looking out for your collective best interest and will not take one side or the other, you're both going to be better off. Okay? Get in the habit of discussing the big decisions with those trusted advisors. Start that now. If there is a conversation about building the budget, reach out to that trusted advisor. Ask them to help you with benchmarks on how much should I be paying in rent? Should we be looking at a new car insurance provider? We've got a little bit of money left over at the end of the month. What's a good investment that we can start putting some of that money in? Should we invest it or should we pay down a debt? This can help you from making some big mistakes. I will admit that, when JC and I got married, I came into our marriage with over $100,000 in student loan debt. Well, one of the things that we did as we started establishing our plan was we sought the advice of external advisors, people like Dave Ramsey and Financial Peace University, who could help us determine what the best path forward was. And external advisory does not necessarily mean that it's somebody that you can pick up the phone and call. That's nice, and you need those, but there are also external resources and places of learning where you can go learn about how to better handle your resources. On the next chart, I regularly ask others for input regarding whether or not they believe I'm managing my money well. I'm in the right-hand column there. I said a little bit earlier that I live in the world of corporate finance, and so I tend not to seek advice because I think I know what I'm talking about. My wife, on the other hand, is very keen on that advice and having those external perspectives, and she's helped me a lot understand that having that external perspective is good because sometimes it can make you change your thinking. And guys, when it comes to the topic of money, if your wife asks you to do something, my general guidance to you is listen to her. It will go a long way toward making your marriage and your home a peaceful place to exist. Basic number 3. Know all the facts. So an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and a wise ear, and a ear of the wise, seeks knowledge. Proverbs 18:15. If you haven't figured it out yet, if you're looking for advice in the Bible about money, Proverbs is generally a pretty good place to start. Another one, Proverbs 27:23 through 24. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds, for riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations. What does that mean? That means you got to understand the condition of your pocketbook. You got to know where the money's going. Why is it going there? How is it getting there? It's really, really, really difficult to make good choices about money if you don't have all of the information about your money. Doesn't it stink when you're a coffee drinker and you run out of coffee? Doesn't it also stink when you're trying to prepare for a meal with friends, you're having people over, and all of a sudden you discover that you don't have everything that you need in order to go make the meal? Therefore, you've got to be prepared. You've got to understand where the money's going. You've got to understand what the money's doing. We'll talk about it a little bit in the planning phase, and I want to come back to this, but every dollar that you bring in on a monthly basis has a job. Knowing the facts helps you understand whether or not your money's doing the job that you want it to do. There are 4 common areas where facts are not routinely gathered. Assets is the first one. What's the value of those assets? What are you coming to the marriage with? Think cars, jewelry, homes, investments, those kinds of things. I want to spend, though, a little bit more time on the second and third. Debt balances and interest rates. Nothing causes more stress in marriage than debt problems. Not having enough money to pay the credit card debt, not having enough money to make the interest payments, not having enough money to pay the car loans, and then possibly even ending up in a situation where you have to have a car repossessed. You have to know the facts about the debt that you have on your books so that you understand and can put a plan in place to go deal with it. The second thing that I want to focus on there is, I want to go back to the debt thing for just a second. If you do have debt, understand there are resources and things out there that can help you. The Merge team will be sharing with you the snowball method, which is a proven method to help you get out of debt. Financial Peace University uses a similar method called the debt snowball. If you find yourself in a position where you really need to take some very intentional steps, I would encourage you to consider FPU as a possible next step where you can really get in and you can dive deep into the topic of money, mortgages, investments, insurance, as well as steps with helping get out of debt. So spending. Spending is not magic, right? It's not there's nothing to it, and there's more than one way to skin that particular cat. This is probably the most vital part, though, of gathering all of the facts. When I talked about your money having a job, you've got to give each dollar a place at the beginning of each month so that you know what your money's doing for you. That's part of collecting all the facts. What's your money doing now? You've got to understand where you are before you can go make any changes. The fact of the matter is that things like Apple Pay on your phone, credit cards, other methods, Google Pay, there's a bunch of them. They've made it so easy for you to spend money now, and it's really, really easy to find yourself in a really, really bad spot in a hurry. If you don't get the spending part figured out, I can guarantee you your money is not doing what you want it to go do. And this is an area where you may find that you've got to make some difficult decisions about the kinds of changes that you need to go make. You need to do this. It's non-negotiable. You gotta do this. This is the basis for everything that you're going to do going forward. And you got to know the why behind the categories. So as we talk about building a budget and giving each dollar a job at the beginning of the month, that means that you have a plan. We'll talk about the budget plan in just a minute. There's ways that you can go do that. And there are ways that those things are categorized. There's ways that spending gets categorized to make sure that you have captured all of the spending that you need to go do. So on the next chart, it says each month I know where my money goes because I systemically track my expenses. The 62% here that say yes is even a little misleading because I would contend to you that most people really don't. They might have a budget app they use. You need a budget, Mint. I mean, there's a bunch of different tools out there that you can use. But the reality is that what a lot of people are doing is tracking transactions and then putting them into place. The question that you have to ask yourself is, are you practicing proactive debt management? Are you proactively trying to get out of debt? Are you proactively managing your spending with the use of these tools so that you really are making sure that your money's working for you and not you working for your money? The next one is the plan that I talked about, and this is really core to financial management. I think for JC and I in our marriage, this was one of the most important things that we did. Having a plan has been so important to any financial success that we're having. You can't defeat debt without a plan. And if you're coming into this with debt, you've got to be able to know how you're going to get out of debt. Well, putting a budget together, which is the plan for your money, is going to be the tool that enables you to go do that. If family incomes are the same, families with a plan save about twice as much as those without a plan. I'm going to say that again for effect. If family incomes are the same, so you and I are making the exact same amount of money, we have a plan and you don't. The statistics say that we will save twice as much as you do. And saving becomes really important because if you don't have savings, that's when Murphy's Law hits. And we'll talk a little bit more about Murphy as we go through this. But Murphy is the guy, the invisible guy that will reach out and bite you. You've overextended yourself. You've been out to eat one too many times. Oops, the dishwasher goes out. Oops, I've got a car repair I've got to go make. Now what do you have to do? Well, you walk over and you swipe the credit card. The debt load starts to build. By having a plan, you can mitigate Murphy. This is also where the idea of stewardship comes in. The idea of a steward is that a steward is somebody who is managing something on behalf of somebody else. God is allowing us to be the stewards of His resources, going back to what we talked about at the beginning. Remember, God owns it all. Think about it from His perspective. Would you trust somebody to manage your money for you if you weren't convinced that the individual you were handing your money to had a decent plan? The short answer to that question is no. You're not going to trust your money to somebody that doesn't have a plan and that you aren't convinced is acting in your best interest. Have a plan. Be a good steward. The Bible says, to whom much is entrusted, much is expected. So if you want to be entrusted with more, you have to demonstrate that you're worthy of more. Stewardship is how we go do that. Jesse Meacham, who invented one of the tools that I talked about a second ago, it's YNAB, it's called You Need a Budget, says, as Dave Ramsey does, you have to give each dollar a job. Well, the plan and the budget is how you accomplish that. Sit down at the beginning of the month, establish a budget, establish a plan, and have those weekly budget meetings. Now, you're not going to get it right the first time. These budget conversations can get frustrating. Be patient. Stick with it. Over time, you'll identify where you missed in the budget. I can't remember after we had our first child, how long it took us to dial in the budget. And as the kids have grown, we continually have to revisit how much we spend on things like groceries and clothes. We can't keep our kids in shoes because they're growing so fast right now. So you have to continually revisit those things as your family grows and changes over time. Families are not static. They don't stay the same. The plan that you have today is not, the plan that you're going to need in 10 years. Lives change. Continually reevaluate the plan. But the first thing you have to do before you can evaluate the plan is get the plan. I had a boss tell me one time that when you're facing a difficult task and you have a daunting challenge in front of you, literally the best thing you can do is get started. Right? This is no different. Start the plan. It will get easier as you go, I promise. And trust me, it's worth the time that you'll spend on it. The next chart, how many people live on a budget and compare your actual expenses to my budget at least once a month? Well, that conversation to me and those statistics are interesting, but I need to challenge you here. Proactively manage your budget. Just comparing the budget amounts to what you actually spend is not proactive budget management. Look throughout the month, each week as you go through, and take proactive steps to manage the budget. Cut down where you need to cut down. If you have to surge one week, make a commitment to trim back the next. Use this as a tool to proactively manage your money. Let's see. Give something. This is a really important point that I need to make. When you set up your monthly budget, make sure that giving is a part of it. I cannot emphasize enough the power of the tithe and the power of giving. I'll come back to a little bit of my testimony with my wife on that in just a couple of minutes, but that is a very, very, very powerful thing that you need to make sure that you cover. Basic number 5, never compare yourself to others in the advertisements and the media. Our materialistic culture today is so focused on keeping up with the Joneses. It's very easy to look around. So-and-so has a nicer car than I do. So-and-so lives in a better house than I do. So-and-so has a particular watch, a particular brand of golf club. They have a particular brand of shoes, clothes, ladies, and nobody's immune from getting caught up in that, right? The problem with the comparison game is that no one ever wins, least of all your pocketbook, and it's always going to lead to discontentment. The problem is that many of us, the problem is not that, you end up wanting more, but you end up wanting more than somebody else. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having wants and desires, but when you get into this perpetual comparison game, you're never going to be satisfied. Saying that you deserve a car, saying that you deserve a certain thing is not the mindset that I think God would want us to have. And if you understand what your propensities are toward being discontent, it can help you manage them. Being conscious about those things and acknowledging them consciously with your partner can help you both work together to proactively manage that so that you don't spend in places where you don't need to. Sometimes the best thing that you can do for yourself, especially in the culture today, if you're really looking to ease the amount of discontentment in your life, if you're struggling with comparison, unsubscribe from social media. Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, get off of it. There is enough keeping up with the Joneses just by walking around and living life and being out in public every day. You don't need the added pressure that social media puts on you. At the time that this was put together, if you made $34,000 a year, you were in the top 4.91% of the richest people in the world. Think about that. In the country that we live in today, $34,000 is almost below the poverty line, but yet it's still within the top 5% of the richest people in the world. How lucky we are to live in the society that we do. But with living in this society comes this keeping up with the Joneses mentality, this comparison mentality. More and more and more is never enough. I would encourage you when you get into these situations, have Bible verses, have conversations with your partner. 1 Timothy 6:6-8 is a great place to go. Now there is great gain in godliness with contentment, for we brought nothing into the world that we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. Remember, it's all God's at the end of the day anyway, right? You didn't come into this world with anything, and you're not going to be able to take it with you. The pharaohs in Egypt tried that, and last I checked, all of that stuff that they tried to take with them is still there. Another verse that I found some comfort in as I was preparing for this talk, Paul said in Philippians, "Now that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. And in every circumstance, I have learned the secret to facing plenty and facing hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me." God is your source. So focus on that as opposed to focusing on what the Joneses next door have. Now, when I compare myself to others, how often do I feel like I have less than others? Yeah, you find that 30 people out of 100 say that they do feel like they have less than others. I think that if we went back through this today and we did a wider sample, that number is actually probably a little bit higher than the 70% who say no. Basic number 6, budget money for each person to spend. So this is kind of going back to the whole to the whole God is not a cosmic killjoy conversation, right? You both have wants, you both have desires. The conversation about money, especially in this area, is a little bit like dieting. If you are so dogmatic about following the budget that you never have any fun, the chances that you're going to stick to it are between slim and none, and Slim's on his way out of town. Okay? So find money in the budget. My wife and I, when we do our budget each month, we call it blow money. It's money that JC has, it's money that I have, and we can go spend it on whatever we want to. We don't have to ask the other person for permission to spend that money. You can spend it on books. I choose to spend mine on golf. That's a recurring theme with me. But the important thing is to have that money that is set aside for you to go have fun with. It makes following the budget much more easy, much easier for both of you and much more palatable. Philippians 2:4, let each of you look not only on his own interest, but also the interest of others. You have a responsibility to make sure that your spouse is happy and content. So do this. Do yourself a favor. Build this into the process. There's nothing wrong with having a little fun money set aside. And it doesn't have to be split equally either. JC and I do. We split it equally each month, but that doesn't mean that what works for us has to work for you. Find a compromise and put that compromise in place. Basic number 7, don't let income determine your lifestyle. Proverbs 38:9, give me neither property nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. So don't let how much income you have drive how you feel about your lifestyle. Money is not going to buy happiness. Some people would disagree. Some people think that money and material possessions do buy happiness, but with more money comes more stress. It's more to manage. The great theologian Biggie Smalls, I think, said, "More money, more problems," and that is ubiquitous, right? Andrew Carnegie said, millionaires seldom smile. Well, why is that? Well, it's because a lot of money creates a lot of responsibility. John Jacob Astor, who at one time was one of the wealthiest men in the world, said, I'm the most miserable man on earth. I mean, think about the stress that, people like Jeff Bezos, who's the CEO of Amazon, must live on. Elon Musk, the stress that they must live under. And these are two of the richest guys in the world. Money doesn't make you happy. At a certain point, if you studied psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that another dollar of income is not going to make you happier. At a certain point, once your basic needs are met, another dollar is not going to add more happiness to your life. You can quickly create a machine that is dependent on a crazy income level. As you work, as you gain more, as you have more things, cars, homes, and things like that, you can end up in a position where you've got something called golden handcuffs on you. And golden handcuffs is the concept that, I'm tied to a particular job. I can't go do what I might want to go do. I can't go follow maybe what the passion that God has given me, because I'm tied to a job that provides for paying the mortgage on the huge house, paying the car payments, buying the jewelry, going on the vacations with friends, the keeping up with the Joneses kinds of stuff that we just talked about. Larry Burkett, who's one of the most famous financial counselors in the world, he was kind of one of Dave Ramsey's predecessors, used to have to convince professional athletes that they could live on less than $1 million a year. He had to actively sell them on the idea that they could live on less than $1 million a year. Just pause and think about that for just a second. You don't always believe, and listen, this sounds insane, right? But don't always believe what you can qualify for, right? And this becomes really important when you start having conversations about buying a car or having a mortgage. Just because the bank is willing to lend you the money to go buy an $800,000 house doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you need to go do. Sometimes less is really more. Proverbs 23:4-5 says, riches fly away like an eagle, and that really is true. A better alternative is to really seek out that contentment that we talked about just a second ago. I expect that my income will continue to increase as I get older. Yeah, 92% of us said yes. That says something, doesn't it? I wonder if there's a little bit of hope in that. People got some golden handcuffs on, that they're hoping that, the job is going to continue to increase the amount of money coming in the door so that they can keep paying for stuff. Basic number 8. This is one of the most important principles to me in finances, and that is giving and making giving a priority. And I want to spend just 30 seconds here drawing a distinction between giving and tithing. Tithing in the Old Testament was the 10% that we were all called upon to give. That was kind of the standard, right? The tenth is the 10% that's brought into the storehouse. Malachi 3:10 says, "Bring the entire tithe into the storehouse so that there might be food for my people." It's the only place in the Bible where God says, "Test me in this." And the other side of that is, he says, "Test me in this and watch and see that I will pour out a blessing so big that you will not have room for it." Okay? Trust me. Test him. It works. I'll talk a little bit about our testimony in just a second in that. But I want to talk about giving for just a second. Giving in the tradition that I come from, in the tradition that I grew up in, is that you give to the house over and above the tithe. Those things that you do with other charities. Handing $20 to the single mom on the street that's hungry, that's got 2 kids who are also hungry. That's giving. That's just being a giver and living a generous lifestyle. And there is nothing more joyful in your life that you will ever experience than giving and seeing the look on somebody's face when you've helped them out. $20 won't even feed my family of 4 at Del Taco or McDonald's anymore. But $20 can change somebody else's entire day. When JC and I first got married, one of the conversations that we had to have as we established our finances was about the topic of tithing. She grew up tithing. I did not. I did not see my parents follow the principle of tithing, and she did. She did. That was something that her family had always done. It was something that they were even raised to do. She and her brother had to tithe off of their allowances as they had jobs. They had to tithe off of the money that they were given. And, as chance would have it, my comments to you fellows about happy wife, happy life. Well, I said, okay, we'll go do this. We'll try it. And it wasn't long before the tangible outflow of that from God started to manifest itself in our lives. We'd get a $100 check in the mail, a refund from the insurance company. It was a little bit like getting the Monopoly card that says bank error in your favor, collect $25, right? That stuff started happening. We'd overpaid into our escrow. Here's a check for $500. Job promotions started happening. Things that would, over 10 years of marriage, account to blessings beyond our wildest dreams, manifested in our lives, all because we were faithful with the tithe. I believe that with every fiber of my being. If you're not giving, I cannot tell you what a tremendous blessing you are missing out on. Do yourself a favor. Build it into the plan. Make it part of how you manage your finances on a monthly basis. If you believe what many of us believe, that money really does bring happiness, and when we go shopping, We look for money to bring us joy in the things that we buy. The reality is that spending that money on yourself is empty compared to watching the life change on somebody's face when you take that money and you bless somebody else with it who can use it more than you can. It's such a blast to give. Dave Ramsey in Financial Peace University in the last lesson says that, generous people make our eyes leak. They do. They bring tears to your eyes. He tells a story, and I'll never forget this story. Dave Ramsey, he tells a story about a gentleman who was a millionaire who had done well in his life, bought an entire truckload of bicycles for some inner city kids and at Christmas one year. And the condition that he made to the charity that he bought the bicycles for said, I've got one condition, and that condition is my family and I want to come hand the bicycles out with you. You want to talk about a life-changing story for those kids who had never had a bicycle. Even telling the story on video, it's pretty easy to see Dave get choked up. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of times he's told that story, but that's the impact that giving has. So do yourself a favor. Build giving into your plan and manage your money with a stewardship mindset. The biblical view of resources, going back to that, is that it's all God's, right? So if you think about it from that mindset, you're not necessarily even giving away at that point anything that you own. If it's all God's and all you're doing is stewarding it, and God says, we love cheerful givers. If God says we are to help the single mom, if God leads you to help somebody with $20 here, $20 there, filling somebody's tank of gas who might have run out kind of in the midst of a trip. If God wants you to do that and you're stewarding his resources, it just feels like doing something for somebody with resources that are somebody else's, and that somebody else happens to be God, and he's told you to help the person out. Feels to me like it would be kind of dumb not to do that. The New Testament says the following: we love joyful giving. That's 2 Corinthians 9:7. Don't do it under compulsion. Once again, 2 Corinthians 9:7. And then the last one is, it should be done sacrificially. Do it with joy in your heart. That comes from the story of the widow's mite, where Jesus and his disciples are standing around outside the temple. The widow comes in. She gives the absolute smallest amount that could possibly be given. And the Pharisees and the other rich folks are coming in, dumping all this money in. And Jesus turns around to his disciples and said, I'll tell you, watching what she did, she gave more than anybody else did because of what that gift meant to her. Think about that. These principles are basic, but I can't tell you how powerful they are. I wish you all the best in your marriage. I look forward to hearing about your success. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you.